Yo, what's going on? Hope you're doing well. Today is a very exciting day, and that is because it is the first day out on my new Ibis HD6. I just finished up this build yesterday, and I cannot wait to get this thing dirty. It's been a long time since I've ridden a new bike, and I just can't wait to test this thing out. So I'm gonna flip the camera around, give you a brief rundown of my initial setup before we head out, and then we're gonna hit the trails. So here is the bike. In case you missed it, last week I just uploaded a full in-depth bike build of this thing, and it is looking like such a beaut. We've got the HD6 frame in the orange color. We got the new Marzocchi Super Z up front, the new RaceFace Turbine handlebar for the cockpit. A few new parts on this thing, and I just cannot wait to test them out. For my initial setup, we are looking at 20% sag for the fork, which was recommended by the Ibis setup guide, 25% sag on the rear shock. We're running 26.5 PSI in the rear tire, 25.5 in the front tire. Those are just some baseline settings. We're gonna adjust as needed in these next few laps, and I just cannot wait to see how this thing performs. To start things off on this bike, we're at a trail that I am super familiar with. I've ridden this trail a lot on various models of bikes, from e-bike, short travel bike, long travel bike. I actually filmed a video project on this trail called ISO Raw, which I'll link in the description below as well. And yeah, it's a short little loop. I can kind of bang out a few laps, adjust my settings. And because I've ridden other models of bikes on this trail, I kind of know what I'm looking for. So I thought it was a good way to break this thing in. Getting ready to drop for lap number 1 here. I haven't ridden this trail or trail bikes in a bit of time, so I'm gonna take it pretty easy and cruisy for lap 1. So let's get into it. Phew. A little bit of wind this morning as well. Oh yeah. Whoa. Brakes still need to bed in. Yeah. Whew. I bed these brakes in yesterday in the driveway, but they still got some work to do. Nice. Woo. Successful first lap there. Just wrapped up with a nice cruisy first lap there, not really pushing anything hard whatsoever. But yeah, initial impressions on the bike, it pedaled really well on the way up. I definitely think my rear shock is too soft. So that started out at 25% sag, which is at the plusher end of the spectrum. So I'll probably toss about 10 PSI in there, maybe 15. I'll kind of see how I'm feeling. Don't have everything to measure sag at this point, but I do have a shock pump. So I'm gonna pump that up, do another lap. I do have everything I need to put in some new volume spacers in the shock and fork if needed down at the car. So yeah, I think let's just toss some pressure in this rear shock and head out for another run. All right, getting ready for lap 2 here. Brake should be hitting a little bit better right off the bat. Got a little more pressure in the shock. Everything else has stayed the same. A little bit of wind picking up, but yeah, let's get into it. Super stoked to get this bike dialed in. Rear shock already feels way more supportive. Woo. Oh yeah. We are riding way better. Woo. Going for the KOM right now feels like hit the double too. Let's go. Not a clack coming from the back end. Something's loose. But we are ripping. Ooh, almost washed it. Yeah, something is loose, but damn, that was a good lap. Whew. Just wrapped up with run number 2 there, and that was a humongous improvement from run number 1. The extra 15 psi in that rear shock made quite the big difference, as well as those brakes biting right off the bat. After the first lap, I was really anticipating not only to have to go up in rear shock psi, but also go up in volume spacer size. There's one telltale feature on this trail for me, kind of like in terms of rear shock feel, and it's this blind roll. You kind of like crest over, and then there's a big G out at the base of it. And run number 1 there, I like G'd out gnarly, like collapsed into the bike, like definitely basically a full bottom out. But with that extra 15 psi, it held me up really well. Didn't feel like I bottomed out, like felt really supportive, and I had really good mid-stroke support everywhere else. So I think we're pretty close with that rear shock. So moving on, we're gonna play with the Grip X damper. This thing's got high, low speed compression on it. I've never ran it before. Right now we've got both of those settings in the middle. One of them is 15 clicks, one is 16. I forget which is which. But yeah, let's just say for now that the low speed's at 8 clicks, which is about middle for either of those numbers. So we're gonna open up the low speed all the way to try to go for some more feel right off the top of the fork. I'm gonna do a quick bolt check, try to find what that clack was from the back end of the bike, and we are going to let her eat on lap number 3 here. We made it up to the top for run number 3 here, and we've had a very substantial pickup in wind. It was supposed to be super windy today, which is why I came out as soon as the sun crested over that mountain and hit the trails. But yeah, with this wind, we're not going to be able to hit that triple drop down at the bottom because that thing is quite susceptible to a wind gust. So we're going to keep it pretty shreddy, I would say, besides that one part of the trail. And looking forward to see how this fork performs with the low speed compression all the way open. Phew. All right, clipped in, and let's get to this. Fork is sitting quite a bit more into the travel. Oh, little nose manual there. All right, we're not gonna hit this triple. Whew. Just scrubbing. Couldn't find anything loose on the back end of the bike, and there's still a little clack going on, so I'll have to identify that later. Whew. Oh yeah, that was good. Still got that little bit of a clack going on, but nothing like feels loose in my hands or feet, just a noise. So, and couldn't find anything, but all in all, that run was super solid. I would say that the fork fully open, you can kind of see where we're at travel wise. We're still not running full travel, so we can maybe drop a psi or 2, kind of see how that's feeling. Rear shock, we're using about full travel. Doesn't look like we're using it all the time because this last portion of the stroke has some dust on it from the last little bit of trail. So all in all, we're in a pretty good spot. I did notice that the fork was sitting more into the travel with that low speed all the way open, and especially in that same section of trail we discussed after the second lap, that kind of crest into the G out. I definitely felt like the fork had less support with the low speed all the way open, and I felt that in a few places as well. So I think all in all, with the low speed in a middle position, the top end feel was still really, really good, and it got better obviously with it open, but I do like kind of the extra support of it in that middle position, which is really promising, because sometimes with the dials, as soon as you start closing them, you really lose that top end feel. So really impressive work from the guys at Marzo and Fox on this thing, that you're able to use that dial and still maintain that top end feel. I think I'll probably put it at 4 clicks, just, you know, in between, and then adjust from there. And maybe I'll drop a psi or 2, go to like 70 about in that fork. But yeah, I'm like super stoked on how this bike is feeling. So make that quick change to the fork and probably do another lap here and then maybe go ride another trail. I'm super stoked. We've got another trail in this same area that's a little less jumpy, so it's you know, not a big deal if it's windy. So we're up here for run number 4 now. As you can likely hear, the wind has continued to pick up. Unfortunately, we dropped fork pressure when I tossed the shock pump on there. I thought we were at 72, but it was pretty hot when I set this thing up in the garage yesterday. So it's actually at 68.5. So it may have been a temperature difference because it's still pretty cool this morning. Additionally, the chambers may have equalized a little bit as I've ridden. Anyways, we are now at 68. And then on the compression, last lap we were fully open on low speed. I wanted a little more hold up. So we are 4 clicks from open on the low speed compression. So still pretty minimal amount. So yeah, let's click in and get into this. Super stoked to be out riding on this beautiful morning. Phew. Oh yeah. Fork is feeling nice. A little pre-hop into that there. Really good hold up. Oh yeah. Definitely feeling like I've got better front wheel traction right now. So windy. Ooh, little skis on that one. Oh, so stoked right now. Windy. Oh my gosh, this thing is feeling unreal. Nice and slow there. Set up high. This is my favorite section. Oh, that drop in fork pressure made a really big difference for me. Almost feel like I could go even a tad bit more, but we're about at full travel. Damn, this thing is feeling so good. Absolutely hyping. Definitely a bit of new bike stoke going down. So maybe take my hype with a grain of salt, but yeah, this thing is feeling so mint. Run 4 there was awesome. Really excited with how the bike is feeling overall. So I'm gonna flip around and show you where we're at with suspension usage. So on the rear shock, you can see the dust wiper is just about at the end of the stroke. And then on the fork, we are just about to the top. Don't really want to go much deeper than that. So I think we're at good usage on the fork, maybe going a little deep on the shock. Now, what I think is interesting is I started out at 25% and 20%, which is about the recommended setting for, you know, most bikes, and especially this one with on the Ibis website. However, I've gone down in fork pressure, so increased sag percentage, and up on the rear shock. So they've maybe kind of met in the middle a little bit. My anticipation of why this is I'm running a pretty high front end, so I think I'm struggling to put more weight on the fork, which is kind of why I'm having to balance the pressures how I am. My suspicion is that if I was running a lower handlebar, perhaps a 20 mil rise with less stack, then I'd already have had more weight on the fork and my initial setup would have been better, but that is just my suspicion. So yeah, feeling good about things, and we're gonna head off to another trail and just get a little bit more bike feel, and then we'll head home and do a full wrap up on my overall feelings of the bike in the garage. So we're back at the truck now, and I was just kind of going through my pressures, triple checking sag numbers now that I've made some adjustments up there. And yeah, we're running like pretty low sag in this rear shock right now. It's at 185 PSI, which is putting me at about, 18% sag. I was kind of measuring between 17 and 18.5. So we'll just call it 18 for a quick average. But yeah, that's like pretty low, and I'm still not getting the bottom out resistance that I'm looking for. So I'm going to pop a volume spacer in this rear shock, and I think that should help with the performance. I also think with doing that, it will put a little bit more pressure onto my front end, which will make my fork feel a little bit better. Still feel like I could maybe drop the fork a little bit in terms of pressure, but I think that this rear shock change will help with the fork. So we'll do one change at a time to isolate things. Just going to use a strap wrench, dust this thing off, toss the volume spacer in, and then we're gonna pedal up to the next trail, see how it's feeling. Here are the volume spacer options we've got. I got a bag of these from the guys at Marzo, and I've been using them, so I actually don't have the full array of spacers. We got the 0.4, which is the blue one, 0.2, which is the stock one in this yellow. And then we got a full 1 inch in the purple, the big dog. I think that there was like a 3/4 inch, like 0.7 or 0.8 that I ran in another bike, which felt awesome, but I don't have another one of those. I think that the 1 inch is a little extreme, so we're just gonna go to the blue one, which is double what we got in there. Nothing too crazy. I'll ask for another set of spacers so I can play with this more in the future. But I think the 0.4 is gonna be the ticket here for this Ibis. We're back in the shop now. Unfortunately, the wind got way too heinous to be able to keep riding. I actually did a 5th lap on the trail we had been riding, and it was terrible. Went over and tried to ride the next trail that I had intended to ride, and I could barely sit on my bike. So overall, our main testing laps were the first 4 that I filmed and broke down as we went. But yeah, now that we're back home, let's flip the camera around, and I'm gonna break down my first impressions of this HD6. So here we have it, the HD6 all covered in that Utah dust, looking too good. So let's start off with sizing. I went for the size 2. They don't do the small, medium, large. They do numbers. So size 2, 454 mil reach. For reference, I am 5 foot 11 inches or 180 centimeters, depending where you're at in the world. I have a full video on sort of my philosophy with bike sizing and my personal experience, which I'll link in the description and also toss a tag up in this upper corner. So if you want to hear some more of my thoughts on bike sizing, I'd recommend checking out that video. But overall, I would say that this bike felt great. The cockpit feeling to me was maybe a little bit on the smaller side, and overall I would say that's due to this handlebar setup. We are running the 40 mil rise bar as well as a couple of spacers there. So if I wanted to increase kind of the effective reach of this bike, I can definitely either drop the stem down or drop to a lower rise bar. But all in all, it was a pretty comfortable feeling. One kind of way that I do my reference for bar height is if you have your bike on a level surface, a good starting point that I just found in an article at one point in time was to have your seat roughly in line with your grips. I forget who wrote that article on Pink Bike, but that's kind of been my reference point in where we're at right now. The grips are about level with the seat. So I think my stack height's in a pretty good spot. But if I were to want to increase the way that this frame feels, I could, drop the front end in terms of spacers or bar rise or go to a 50 mil stem. So a few things to think about, but overall with the sizing, I am pretty happy with it. There are a lot of really cool small details with this frame that I broke down in my bike build, which you can check out as well. But just to name a quick few, I really like the shuttle guard here. There's a lot of really clever spots with some clear tape. There's some above the shock reservoir there, and then a bit on this rear triangle for tire rub. So that's a really cool, neat detail. I also really liked that this came with a metal rear bushing. This is not the shock that comes with their frame set package. It comes with a X2, which I believe actually has a custom tune on it. But when I uninstalled the X2, there was a metal bushing in the rear, which I'm a really big fan of. I used to ride a YT Capra, which the rear shock is in a similar position to this, although it is a different suspension layout. And I would always blow DU bushings in the rear and put metal ones in. So to see Ibis doing that straight from the factory is super dope. Now, moving on to suspension feel, I found the back end of this bike to definitely be on the more linear side of things. I mean, I'm an aggressive rider. However, with the stock 0.2 volume spacer in this rear shock, I didn't find it to be progressive enough, so I went up to the 0.4, which you guys will have seen earlier in this video. Once I tossed the 0.4 spacer in this rear shock, I definitely noticed an improved performance. From the time that I put the spacer in, I was only able to do 2 more laps that were quite windy, so these aren't the most conclusive thoughts. However, I definitely noticed an improvement in travel usage. On the earlier laps, I was using the full stroke of the rear shock, which is good to do. However, just by feeling, it felt like I was doing it on a fairly regular basis, and I was at 18% sag, which is a pretty good sign to toss in a bigger volume spacer, so that's what I did. And then I ran 20% sag with the 0.4 spacer and was using about 3/4 of the travel. Although on those laps, I wasn't riding quite at full pace due to the wind, so I have some more testing to do, but I do think I am headed in the right direction. In terms of overall ride feel with this bike, there wasn't one thing that really blew me away, but just a lot of little things that really impressed me. And my overall initial impression of this bike is that I like it probably even more than I anticipated. To be honest, I really generally have preferred 150 mil and shorter trail bikes in the past, and I've ridden bikes like the YT Capra in the past, mostly just for bike park machines, and that was kind of my intention with this thing. I go to Colorado for the summer and ride at Trestle Bike Park, and I thought that this was going to be the perfect weapon for that. But now I'm starting to think of it a little bit differently. I was so impressed by how this thing pedaled. It was really efficient. And the pedal that I did today typically kicks my butt pretty solid, even on bikes I've ridden in the past, like the YT Izzo, which is a very efficient pedaler. And I did a bunch of laps today and was feeling pretty fresh. So that might be a little bit of a mixture of my performance as a human as well as the bike, but it felt really comfortable just to be on the saddle today, and that has really just changed my thinking of how I'll use this bike. This is my only trail bike I have built up right now, and I was a little worried about that, but I'm not anymore. I think I'm definitely going to go on some pretty big missions on this thing and just use it as my everyday trail bike and love it. A few last little notes here. Fork was feeling really great. That was my first ride on any fork with the 38 millimeter stanchion. I spent a lot of time on the Z1 previously. I definitely noticed a stiffness improvement from that to this, the 36 to the 38. Really impressed with the new damper, as we discussed earlier in this video. You know, messing with the low speed compression knob. I still had great top end feel even when I was 8 clicks in on that. Didn't play with the high speed at all. I'll save that for another testing session, but overall, really impressed with this fork. And other than that, all these parts are parts that I'm, super familiar with. I did switch from my typical DH casing tires to double down. That's pretty minor. Didn't notice a huge difference there. We already talked about the rear shock. This handlebar felt great. This is the new turbine. Have it at 760 mil width from the 780. I think it's really cool that they come size specific for improved compliance. Really stoked on that. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be a full bike check coming on this thing once I have it all dialed in a few weeks' time. But for a first ride, it was a great morning out, and I'm really impressed with it. That's all for today. If you have any questions regarding this bike or the parts I'm running or whatever, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I'll definitely get back to you. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.